Hello and welcome to month 4 of our $5 Quilt Club for 2023. This month we will be doing English paper piecing, which involves folding fabric around a shape. On this one we have curved edges on the top and the bottom, so it is really nice to have these laser cut shapes. We have them available for $1 for 12, or the template's on the website and you can print it out, trace it onto cardstock 12 times and cut them out and you'll be ready to roll. Okay, so this month we're going to be talking about fussy cutting. So right here I have the glow mat, which is really nice because, or a light box, that you can position your fabric and you can see whether or not you can get the motif to be right in the center of your pieces if you're going to fussy cut them out like I've done on the blocks here. So I've put a little shape in the middle of each one, and I apologize in advance if your strip is not big enough so that you can get 12. We tried, but there's just no guarantee that there will be 12 motifs that you can cut out on your pieces. So I'm just going to show you how to do this. You can always get extra fabric. You can alternate it like it shows on the original quilt. It has 2 different pinks. I just couldn't bring myself to put something else in there, so I just fussy cut all 12. If that's not your thing, just do any 12. It doesn't matter. It doesn't even have to be, fussy cut like this. It's all just a fun learning experience. Okay, so now with this light box, and I also have the cutting mat, I can just place my piece right underneath and I can see where I need to cut. So if you don't have a light box or a Caterpillar to put an audition and make sure that you're putting your shapes where you want them to go, you can just trace around your, so you can just put your paper pieces right on top of the motif, and you can just trace around with a chalk pencil, a friction pen, anything that is, fabric safe. Because I have this nicely set up, I'm just going to use a rotary cutter and just approximate about how much space I want on the back of each of these blocks. So you do want to go just a little bit bigger than a traditional 1/4 of an inch so that it has enough to fold around the paper. So that looks pretty good to me. Maybe it's a little too big. I'm going to slice off a little bit there. Okay, so that looks pretty nice. So I am going to starch my fabric to make sure that it is nice and crispy and will stay in position. I'm using Wild Mint Flatter. So I'm just going to spray. I always spray in the air. So I just spray in the air a couple pumps. And then I like to just hit it with the hot iron. These do smell so good. Okay, so now it's nice and flat. So I'm going to put my shape right in the center of that. I'm going to move that over a little bit. And then we can use glue to glue the edges down. So Elmer's glue works just fine as long as it's the water soluble or washable type. My favorite for sure is the Soline pen, which allows you a lot more control when you're gluing. So the most important thing is that you are never going to get any glue on this very edge, because that's where you're going to be pulling up the fabric. And if there's glue there, it's like a nightmare. It's like so difficult to get the fabric sewn to the next piece. So I'm just going to apply a layer of glue all the way across the piece, and trying to avoid this very edge. So I want to leave an 1/8 inch right on the edge where there's absolutely no glue. And I'm just going to pull that nice and flat all the way across, just like that. So for the curved edge, I'm just going to show you that you can use Elmer's glue. I like to be a lot less generous with this glue because it's a little bit stronger than this glue. It's a little bit harder to control though, but it shows up on the video a little bit better. Because of the huge fat tip, it's not quite as easy to apply. So it's kind of like if anybody's ever made dumplings or pasties, you're just going to fold the edges in, and it's going to just pull and pucker a little bit, and that is totally what we want. And we want to just hold that, make sure all of that glue gets set in place, holding that fabric. So once that part is done, then you're going to, again, you're just going to glue all the way across. Oh, shoot. It's so hard with these large glue sticks. All the way across. I'm going to try to wipe that up. It's going to make a headache later. And then you just want to pull nice and tight across the edge there and glue all of that down. So I'm going to hold that like that. Looks like I'm going to use this one. Get it in there. Make sure that it stays put. I don't want any of this moving. Okay, so for this one, because this is an inside curve, not an outside curve, you are going to need to make some relief cuts. So up here we have excess fabric, and down here there's just not too much. So I got away with making 3 cuts. And when you're doing the cutting, you want to make sure that you're staying a 1/4 inch away from the edge of your paper so that it you're not going to see any of those cuts across. So I'm going to really carefully try to hit this with the Elmer's glue, and then I'm going to fold it. So as I fold that, you can see how the fabric separates like that, and that is glue basting. This is really not staying down in the corner. I'm going to hold that there. Okay, so that is what you're going to want to repeat 12 times. So that is glue basting. So you can see I have these all glue basted. So you can see all the fabric. Looks like sometimes I did 4 cuts. I guess just whatever I felt like. So there's my my hand stitching. So I did what's called the flat back whip stitch. And I'm just going to do this fussy cutting one more time because I have to have 2 pieces to sew together to show you. Here, let's see. You kind of ended up with fabric that is, some people call it Swiss cheese because it's got all those holes in it. So fussy cutting kind of leaves you with some funny fabric for sure. All right, maybe I'll try this little cute house. So we'll see if he can fit under there. Make sure that I put it in the center and that I have enough on all the edges. So that looks pretty good. I'm just going to use my rotary cutter and really quickly go across here and cut all these guys out. I'm not going to cut anything off the bottom, just to make sure that that is not too small on the bottom. So I've traveled around with this for a little bit, so my fabric's a little wrinkly, so it is definitely better to have your fabric nice and pressed so that you can get that flat on your shape. So I like where that's at, and I just don't want it to move, so I'm just going to put a little dab of glue right here so it stays when I go to flip it over. So it looks like I was a little too generous on that side, so I'm just going to take a tiny bit off on that. Oh no, I didn't cut my thread, did I? Okay, there's my needle. Okay, so I'm going to glue base this in place again. So again, I'm going to use this Elmer's glue because it shows up nicely on the camera. It is not my preference. I really like the Sew Line glue a little bit better. And then I'm going to pull the fabric all the way down and just press and hold it just a couple seconds, and it will stay in place. And again, like you're doing I don't know if there's any pasty makers out there, but pasties or dumplings, you want to get that all the way across. So I'm just going to fold, and then as I fold each time, I'm holding it with the other finger, and it makes those little cute little folds like a pleat. And I'm just going to hold that in place like a pie, right? Okay, so last side. Again, we'll get that to glue. Do not glue on the edge of your fabric. Glue down. And then we'll make our relief cuts. Okay, and we will glue across. Okay. Perfect. Very, very good. Okay, so now we have our, oh my God, stop rolling. Okay, so now we have 2 shapes. So there are 2 ways of doing this. You can do flat whip stitch, or you can do the traditional whip stitch. So if you're doing the traditional whip stitch, all you have to do is hold your two pieces together. You're going to line them up definitely at the bottom first. And then if you don't fold the tops perfect, sometimes there's just one little part that needs to be folded a little bit more, and we can alter that. But the bottoms, you definitely want to line those up. So I'm going to show you the quilter's knot real quick. So I have a threaded needle here. Here is my needle. So here is the end of the thread. I just take the end of the thread, I put it on top of the needle, and then I'm going to wrap it around there 1, 2, 3 times, pull all of those wraps down into my finger, hold that, pull the needle out while holding all of those twists and wraps, and at the very end makes a knot. So that's my knot, and that's where I'm going to start. So I'm going to line these two up, and all I'm going to do is take a couple threads on both sides, and if you don't glue right there, then it's easy to stitch across. If you do glue, then it's very difficult to pull up the fabric from the paper shape because it's glued down, so the fabric doesn't want to shift at all. I hate this little tag. It's always in my way, so I like to trim those real early. And so your whip stitching is just stitching across and always in the same direction. So I'm just going to stitch all the way across, and I do this tinier your stitches, the more secure your sewing will be. And then you're just grabbing just a few threads on each side and then pulling it. And I'm trying to keep the stitches pretty consistent, and that's how much thread it goes across, or how many threads are across. And then I'm just going all the way each side, just like that. The great advantage of English paper piecing is its mobility. It is so cool that you can do this on the go. So whether you're waiting at the dentist office or you're on a long car ride, it is so nice to be able to sew on the go. The most common English paper piecing is a hexagon. I'm sure everybody's seen those. So that is what's so nice about English paper piecing. If you notice that if you are stitching with cotton thread, the thread gets tangled really, really easily. I am using this thread, which is Deco Bob by Wonderfill. It's a fantastic 80 weight polyester, which means it doesn't knot as much. If you do like using cotton thread, or if that's all you've got, my favorite thing to use is called Thread Gloss, which is a beeswax based product. Cotton candy is my favorite. And all you have to do is you set your thread right down on it, really lightly hold it, and you can gloss your thread so that it will slide in through the fabric really easily. It won't knot up as much, and it just smells like happiness because I got cotton candy. There's a whole bunch of different flavors. There's Fruit Loops, there's wintertime, there's lots of different flavors to enjoy as you're stitching along. My favorite is to listen to an audiobook, in the sunshine or by the pool, and you can happily stitch away outdoors. So that is how you do the traditional whip stitch. What I've found is that when I do traditional whip stitching, you can see the thread. So you should ideally use the same color of this background, if not slightly lighter than this, so that you don't see any of these stitches. So hopefully you can see that gray thread in there. There's two schools of thought on this. A lot of people will say, I don't ever want to see the stitches. I'm kind of on that. Other people are like, I want to see the stitches so that you can tell that it was hand sewn. So they want to take, lots of pride in their work, and that's totally fine. My favorite to do, though, is with doing the flat back whip stitch. So here I have an amazing roll of tape that someone really nice gave to me, but it is just a masking tape, a painter's tape, anything that will not leave any residue on your pieces, and that's really easy to tear. So you're gonna tape the front of your pieces to do the flat back whip stitch. So I'm just gonna go ahead and change over to doing that. And then when you're doing the flat back whip stitch, you do have to hold your pieces flat, and you're going to do the exact same thing. You're going to pick up threads on both sides and just stitch all the way across. And I don't like to leave my thread too long because, as you can see, it does get caught on the edges of your pieces all the time, and that is no fun. So I'm gonna, there, that's really close. So as you can see, I'm just really closely, just like if you're doing the whip stitch, I'm grabbing, you know, 3-4 threads on either side, and right next to each other, really not more than a couple strands of thread apart. And I'm just stitching completely all the way across. So pick up my threads on both sides and then pull through. So this is a challenge to you guys because you are in our awesome skill building program, and we're trying to expose you to all different types of techniques, and this is definitely a very popular one out there. So that is how you do the flat back whip stitch. So it looks like my corner right here didn't get pushed all the way down, so it doesn't look like it matches. So just so you guys can see that, I'm going to undo that corner and pull that back down. So you can see how this is how it was and it doesn't line up, which does not look great. So I'm going to grab the glue I can control and put that there. I'm going to, wow, I need to clean that off. It's so dirty. Okay, that is not leaving my hand. Okay, so I'm just going to get a little more glue out, and I'm going to try to control that so that I will get... pull that all the way down. That way it will match really nicely. So that looks way better. So just to show you what the flat back whip stitch looks like is that you cannot see my stitches through here. So you can a little bit when I'm up there, but the very, very top. So you cannot see my gray thread. Ideally, you definitely want to be matching your thread to your project. So that is how you do the whip stitch. I sewed all mine together in pairs because it's nice and easy to work with on the go. I just tape 2 together, grab another 2. I use the same piece of tape as many times as I can. Sometimes it's 10 times. Sometimes, depending on the fabric, you know, it's only a few times. So I like to reuse the same piece of tape as much as I can. And then I just get a new one. So this roll of tape is probably going to last me like 10 years. So, all right, so on to our applique of the pieces once they're all completed. So you do have to take the papers out before you stitch it down to your block. This block should measure at least 10.5. So it will give you a little bit of leeway to put your block on it. So you do want, you know, your 1/4 inch on either side so that when you go to sew this together, you will have a little bit of room, right? So anyway, here's your block, and then you want to center it. So to find the center, you can fold your block in half and find the center, and then fold your pieces in half and find the center and line them up that way. Or you can just use a ruler and measure, you know, a 1/4 inch on all sides, and that way it will be nice and centered. If you, so you can take out the pieces before you do it. Alternatively, you can stitch all of this down by hand and then make a small slit in the back and pull out your papers. I like to pull out my papers ahead of time. So once I have my entire ring put together, I'm going to starch all of this, both on the front and the back, to make sure that this will all stay in place. So I'm gonna heavily starch this because I do not want to lose any of my shape, right? Because we spend a lot of time basting that, and we want to make sure that it will stay curved and pretty. Okay. Oh, looks like I have a little bit of glue residue there. So, gosh, that smells good. All right, so I'm gonna do that side, and then I'm going to do this side. So you are able to use your papers more than once if you wanted to make another block. I know in this particular design, we do not have another one of these on the quilt. This is one of those unique ones because I know hand sewing can be a bit of a deterrent to some people. They do not like hand sewing, which is totally fine. You are able to just applique these down if you want. You can just do a fusible applique if that is your preference, or you can just make another one of the previous blocks. I mean, it's totally up to you. It's your quilt, right? So, all right, that looks pretty nice and starched. So I do like to use a needle. Oh, I have that one attached. To pull out my papers, or a pin. So I'm just going to put my pin right underneath the edge of the fabric and just give it a little bit of a tug. Right. As long as you don't put too much glue on it, then they come up pretty nice. So some of these I used Elmer's glue, and some of them I used the Sew-Line glue. It just depended on what I had at the time. So once I release all of these, it should completely retain its shape and be nice and just come out really good. So I do go around the shape a couple times, make sure I get all the glue spots. I think there's just a little bit left in that corner. Okay, so then I'm just going to really carefully pull out my shape. Try to press down. Oops. See, if you don't get it all, it rips. You can't reuse that one because I ripped it. So if you're really gentle, you can pull it out. And patient. You need to be patient. You can pull out your shape. No, there's still glue. It's like go around and around. It feels like you get it all. There we go. Okay, so see how it stayed, all of it's in its shape except for that one part. I got impatient. And then I starch it again because I don't want this baby to go anywhere. So I'll give it another few shots. If you do get a way to conserve some of your spray starch would be to use one of those mister sprays. They're really nice because it gives a nice mist and evenly coats it instead of going, like with this one, because it's really heavy in some spots and really light in others. So just gonna again iron that, making sure it's nice and flat. And that's how you take the papers out. So once you, if you're taking the papers out because you're going to machine sew it down, you're going to position this in the right spot, glue it in place, pin it in place, use magnets, use whatever it is you like. I like to glue it in place with good old Elmer's. So I will position where I want it to go, and then I will lift up a little bit and glue very generously because it's water soluble. So if any of it's on the black, it'll come out later. And then you can either machine stitch this down. So you have to go really slow. You might have to use kind of a short stitch length, not too big, but not too small. So maybe like because if it's really big, like a 3.5, you're not going to get, you're going to have to turn your project every time to maintain this curve, because all of these are curves, and then this entire thing is a circle. So you're gonna have to go really, really slow with your sewing machine. You can use a zigzag, a cool applique stitch, use some variegated thread, or you can invisibly, hand sew it down. So I'm just gonna cut this so I can show you how to stitch that down. So once you have this where you want it to go, you're going to pin it, glue it, use magnets. There's something called Sew Tights, which are sewing magnets that will keep everything in place for you. Whichever method and tools that you have available, you can use those. So if you're going to be doing the whip stitch on the back, it's the same method as doing it from I'm sorry, the same way as doing the EPP. So you're just going to make little stitches all the way across and get that sewn on there kind of invisibly like this. So just kind of pick up threads on both sides and then stitch across. And that way you can really easily get your shape sewn to your block. So obviously hand sewing it down like that will take a lot longer than using a machine. I know I sometimes get kind of impatient and when I'm doing curves, it's just if you don't have that speed control, it's really, really hard to get it to go really slow so that you can get the stitch on there, a straight stitch, perfectly spaced all the way across that little curve. So that's how you take out shapes. If you want to hand stitch this down, you can hand stitch it down. If you would rather do it by machine, you can definitely do it by machine as well. So, but same kind of concept. I just pick up threads on both sides, both the black and the pink, and then there's my stitching. So that's what that looks like. I would probably use a pink thread so that you can see. If I didn't, then you probably wouldn't be able to see it all in this video. So I'm just using the gray because I have that on hand and you can see it a little bit better. So that is how you take out your papers. That's how you hand stitch it to your background. If you want to do it by machine, that is totally fine. We don't have a video on how to machine applique it, but it is just, you know, position it in place with pins, glues, magnets, whatever you like, and then just stitch around the edges. Use any kind of stitch that you want. Alternatively, it might be really, really cool if you want to hand sew this on, would be to use a really bulky hand quilting thread, like a pearl cotton number 8. And you could, you know, really show, use big stitches, do a running stitch all the way across, and it would be really, really cute. So that you can see how this one was hand done. So I'll probably end up using a high contrast thread to hand stitch my ring down so that it is super, super fun. And it's more hand sewing. So I like being able to do that in front of the TV and outside. So that is, I think the only other thing I didn't talk about was needles. So I like 2 types of needles. These John James ones are really nice because they come in this pebble, which is fantastic. My favorite are Roxanne's. They're really fantastic. There's 50 needles in here, which is amazing. And they're not too expensive. They're pretty close in price, but you get 50 in this one and it comes with a little seashell on top. I like the smaller needles. I don't know if it's because I have small fingers or what, but it is kind of like a personal preference on what length of needle you like. The ones I use are number 9, 10, and 11. Those are the ones that I use the most. It's really just basically which one is the closest to me when I start sewing. But those are, I think that's it. If you guys have any other questions, make sure you give me a call. I'm always happy to help. This is English paper piecing for month 4. And if you have any other questions, just give me a call, text, or email. We're happy to help. Next month is on Memorial Day weekend. We will be open on Memorial Day weekend. We will not be open on the Monday following. So if you know you're going to be out of town, just make sure you prepay for your kit so that you can guarantee that you will have your kit for next month. So if there's nothing else, I think we're all good, and we will see you